Representative Westerman, you have the next amendment designated number 11 to the ANS, and you are recognized for 5 minutes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This amendment, I believe, is something that would actually protect taxpayer dollars from wasteful spending. And when I say wasteful spending, this amendment would prevent serial litigants from receiving funding under the Fish and Wildlife Service subtitle. Left-wing special interest groups have weaponized the ESA by continuously suing the Fish and Wildlife Service for not meeting species listings deadlines that are almost impossible to comply with. The quote, sue and settle process overwhelms regulatory agencies, resulting in settlement agreements and consent decrees requiring agencies to promulgate major regulations with an arbitrarily imposed timeline. Oftentimes these agreements are negotiated behind closed doors with little or no transparency or public input. This allows these radical special interest groups to promote their own federal policy agendas outside of the normal legislative and agency processes. To make matters worse, the groups are financially rewarded for gaming the system. According to GAO, from 2000 to 2010, ESA lawsuits cost taxpayers nearly $24 million in attorney's fees and costs. Private citizens with a net worth of $2 million and for-profit businesses with a net worth of $7 million cannot receive attorney's fees under the Equal Access to Justice Act. However, there is no such cap for nonprofit organizations, which allows these wealthy groups to rake in taxpayer money. Instead of providing the agencies more flexibility with complying with these deadlines, capping these nonprofit organizations, or putting forward other reforms, the majority seems dead set on simply throwing more money at the Fish and Wildlife Service. According to the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, from 2009 to 2017, there were 109 Endangered Species Act settlements. The majority of these settlements came from 3 groups: the Center for Biological Diversity, Defenders of Wildlife, and the Wild Earth Guardians. The image behind me shows how these 3 groups alone accounted for over half of these settlements, and the Center for Biological Diversity was individually responsible for 41 of these 109 settlements. This is not surprising, given that the Center for Biological Diversity's director's quote in 2009 said, quote, when we stop the same timber sale 3 or 4 times running, the timber planters want to tear their hair out. They feel like their careers are being mocked and destroyed. And they are. Psychological warfare is a very underappreciated aspect of environmental campaigning, end quote. That's what taxpayer dollars are funding. Today, we can see the legacy of this mentality in these lawsuits out west. We have had 2 of our worst fire years back to back. I offer this amendment today to prevent serial litigants from these radical special interest groups from stealing more money from hardworking Americans and then using it to sue the taxpayer again, while all the while they're doing more damage to the environment, more damage to wildlife, and they're getting paid by taxpayers to do it. If we're going to spend this much money on Fish and Wildlife Service, please adopt this amendment that would at least prevent these serial litigants from siphoning off of the money and doing more harm than they are good. I urge adoption of the amendment, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields. Any further discussion on Ranking Member Westerman's amendment, number 11?
Mr. Chair, I'd speak.
Gentleman,
Nope.
Mr. Rosenthal, you're recognized.
There we go. Mr. Chair, I've watched this take place throughout the entire state of Montana, where these habitual litigators come in and they tie up timber sales and cause problems, wreak havoc across our landscape. And it ends up being a net loss, because not only do we have these sue and settle transactions that are taking place, that the different agencies and departments are having to put in as a line item budget issue, where they're putting millions of dollars aside so that they can make sure that they're prepared in their budget to accommodate all of these expenses. But they're also losing the revenue, the Forest Service does, on the other side of the ledger, where the sales of timber have been tied up, and they don't have to completely stop it. All they have to do is delay it for about 2 years. A lot of our timber sales are the direct result of beetle kill. And so after about 2 years of those dead trees standing there, they lose their value. And all of a sudden the timber sale isn't going to go through, even if the case was not settled, even if they were allowed to go out there and harvest it, because the sawmill says there's no value there any longer. So that's where we get into this cycle of creating all of this additional fuel, that we have these extreme fires that, I will tell you, has nothing to do with the climate. When you have an extreme fire now, it's because you have all of this excessive fuel that has been built up over years, and all of the dead trees that are laying there to provide that fuel. And what we have is a severe problem where the fires are sterilizing the soil. We have the cascading effect of the weeds that end up stabilizing that land thereafter, because it's the only thing that will grow. We have runoff problems that goes into our streams, that gives us waterway problems. We have fishery problems because of it. So the problems continue to cascade just from this initial issue, which is the habitual litigants. So I would urge everyone to support this amendment from my friend, Representative Westerman, so that we can improve the environment and improve the economic climate as well. Thank you.
Gentlemen, yield back. Anyone else wish to address amendment number 11? Hearing none. Members in favor of the amendment would please unmute and indicate by their favor by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.